there is, at minimum, major confusion, if not outright revulsion, at what the Trump administration has done in the name of the American people, without their input or consent through Congress or any other way. And there are questions now about the president's motives and plans across the board, even as many people look at the extraction effort and say, okay, the military did its job. They understood the assignment. They completed the objective. But what is the purpose of all this? Well, we begin with what's happening today, of course. This morning, Maduro and his wife were in federal court in the United States after that extraction that made so much controversial waves and attention across this weekend. Surely you watch the news, you've heard about it. So you're looking at the courtroom sketches that would be like any other case, except this is not like any other's case. We can tell you Maduro and his wife pled not guilty to a set of charges that have basically been developed over the years in the United States under multiple justice departments, and that includes narco-terror and drug trafficking. Maduro used his appearance in American court today, which is effectively the first time he's really had a platform to say anything after this unusual foreign policy attack and use of warlike United States power, to say, quote, "I have been kidnapped since Saturday. I was captured at my home in Caracas." A helicopter transported Maduro and his wife from where they were being held in federal custody in a Brooklyn jail this morning.
Well, Ari, there's an element of fantasy to all this. I've spent a lot of time in Latin America since I was in my 20s. I know a great deal about Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela. It's an astonishing situation. We should take note, it was a remarkable military operation, audacious, complex, achieved surprised. They got 2 targets out of the country without getting them killed. At the end of the day, it wasn't just electronic warfare and coordination, 150 aircraft. It was Army Delta operators on the ground who the Cubans say killed 30 of their security agents who helped prop up the Maduro regime. Now, having said that, we have never seen in American history a president who would threaten Colombia, "You're next. You'd better watch your ass," and I quote, "a ground operation in Colombia would be something I'd consider." And in the context, he said this about Greenland, Panama, Mexico, annexing Canada. And throughout all this, the only important thing is under Article 1 of the Constitution, Congress has been supine, uninvolved. So we're being governed by whim and by decree. Mr. Trump doesn't have a clue what he's doing on page 2 in Venezuela. No good will come of this the way it's been conducted.
Ambassador.
Well, as always, General McCaffrey makes a ton of good points. It's good to see you again, sir. Last time was in Afghanistan 20 years ago. Now, 15 years ago. There was a tremendous amount of planning that went into the operation itself, a tremendous success, and it appears that the question "and then what" was failed to be answered. There are repercussions to these actions, and the idea that there's kind of the contours of a concept of a plan moving forward. They used earlier, Ari, the term regime change. This is the same regime with different leadership. There's no change here. I know Delcy Rodriguez. And we left behind, I know her well, she and her brother, and we left behind Diosdado Cabello, who's a very bad actor, frankly. And then you have Vladimir Pergino Lopez, who's been in charge of the military since the crustacean period, right? He's been there forever. So you've got a group of people there. You have these different power bases there. And if the idea is that somehow we're in charge, I would just merely suggest that, well, there are 900 political prisoners still in the country. There are wrongfully detained Americans still being detained. I don't see us being in charge. And if the idea, I don't know what the objective is. For me, the objective is restoration of democracy. There was an election last year that was won by Edmundo Gonzalez. It has been very destabilizing what Maduro has wrought to the region. But if the idea is that this is somehow going to become an economic play, I don't see, as you rightly pointed out earlier, boardrooms saying, yeah, we're going to put more money into Venezuela when it's the same exact regime in charge. No independent judiciary, no sanctity of contract. I wonder how we're going to reach the objective, if that's the objective.
Yeah, and Ambassador, I'll read from what you wrote. Without significant security forces on the ground, which again goes to what we've learned from past follies, it's hard to see how a failed state, riddled with illegal armed groups and foreign terror organizations, will somehow remain stable merely by removing a deeply unpopular dictator, Ambassador.
No, without a doubt. Right now, what we're going to be asking Delcy Rodriguez to do things that at some point are going to come up against the hard wall of reality of what Diosdado-Cabello doesn't want to have happen. I'll give you a vignette. In 2018, a member of Congress visited Venezuela while I was there, met with Maduro, and someone I knew, a local councilman, Fernando Alban, was thrown off the 10th floor of the Helicoide, which is the torture center that was run by Diosdado-Cabello. Clearly doing that to tell Maduro, don't negotiate with the gringos without me. This is the kind of person this is. So if you imagine at any point in time, Delcy Rodriguez gets out of line, he can play spoiler because he controls the security services in the country, as well as the criminal network and gangs that run and threaten and intimidate political opposition actors.
Yeah. General McCaffrey, this is one of those shockwave events that even though there was a buildup, both in the region, as the ambassador was discussing, and around the world in the United States, people are still coming out of this weekend going, whoa, I guess this is what we're doing now. And so it would seem that in the days ahead, it's going to be very important for Americans to learn and understand what's being done in their name and whether they want more of this or not. And we have an election this year. The Wall Street Journal, which is the print outlet sister of Fox News, says in returning to this form of, quote, gunboat diplomacy in Venezuela, Trump has spurned the usual veneer of armed interventions, acting without an Oval Office speech justifying the attack, congressional authorization, a promise of elections in a foreign land, or even, as you both noted tonight, a detailed plan for its future. And so, General, what happens in the days ahead? Okay, a congressional briefing here or there, but Trump is openly threatening multiple other countries. It would seem that there's a breaking point somewhere. If we have warlike powers being exercised against multiple countries, do we still have a constitutional limit here?
Well, by the way, something has to be said to add to the ambassador's terrific comments on Venezuela. The Trump administration action against that country, there's an element of goofy to it.